Alright, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back. It's me, Addy, again, and I hope you guys are doing amazing as always. So last week, I finally finished the game that's been making waves as of late. That, of course, being Clair Obscur Expedition 33. And I have thoughts, with a capital T. Of course, this is going to be the short spoiler-free section at the beginning here. I'm just here to give you my quick thoughts on why this game should absolutely be on your radar, and why, as you could probably tell from the title of this video, this is in my top 5 favorite games of all time. Yeah, it's that good. So I sunk about 75 hours into this game. Yeah, and believe me when I say that I wasn't planning on that at all when the game first dropped, but the hype just kept building and building, and I got more and more enraptured, which in hindsight makes sense. I mean, Expedition 33 launched to massive critical and commercial success, and as someone who grew up loving Final Fantasy and classic 90s JRPGs, seeing people call this things like a modern masterpiece that paid homage to stuff like that, in addition to witnessing the sales numbers like 2 million copies in 2 weeks, and of course seeing that this game was one of, if not the highest user-rated games on Metacritic, I was getting some serious FOMO. I just had to jump in to see what the fun was all about, and once I started, I couldn't stop. Side quests, secrets, all of it. So what's this game all about? Expedition 33 is the debut title from a relatively new French studio called Sandfall Interactive. And I just gotta say real quick, if this is how they start, we're in for something special in the long run. The game is a modern take on the turn-based JRPG genre, which I guess technically in this case we'd have to call an FRPG for obvious reasons, but honestly that doesn't even begin to describe it. Since while it borrows heavily from that golden age of 90s and early 2000s JRPGs, it doesn't just copy the past, it evolves it. And I know what you might be thinking here. So okay, Addy, this is turn-based, right? Well, I'm usually not into that. You know, those games are a little bit slow. I don't know if I'll be into this. But here's the thing. This game is deceptively turn-based. And what do I mean by that? If you're someone who generally enjoys real-time combat and games that keep you engaged and on your toes with mechanically demanding aspects like perfect parries and dodging at the last second, you'll be very surprised how much this clicks with you. Expedition 33 somehow pulls off this bizarre magic trick of being turn-based and feeling real-time, and it does so amazingly well. On top of that, the world presented here, it's incredible. It's stunning, gorgeous, colorful, painterly almost, which I would say is an apt way of describing it considering what the game ends up being about, without going into spoilers. And the music, absolutely top tier. Number one, it is insane just how much of it there is. And number two, it is insane how utterly enjoyable each track is. So much so that it is freaking distracting, but in the greatest way possible. You can't even focus on the game half the time because of how amazing the music is. And the soundtrack doesn't just cover these largely classical themes, but it experiments with a whole host of different styles and genres that all pack a hell of a punch here. I gotta share this little side note real quick, but I saw a comment online that perfectly describes this game's music, and it is this. It's nice of the developers to have included a free game with this soundtrack. Freaking brilliant. It's so true. And the characters, you know, a component that is incredibly important to an RPG, I am more than happy to say, are beautifully written, memorable, and emotionally resonant in such an imaginative and unique story that begs to be replayed, just so you can unpack all the little threads and details you missed the first time around. And that's the best kind of story. It is smart, elegant, impactful, and it's also on Xbox Game Pass, which means if you've got that, there is literally no excuse not to try this game out. There is some godlike value here, considering the game's $50 price tag on pretty much every platform. I would have paid so much more for this game, and in a way I'm pretty much going to. I personally played this on PC Game Pass, but I am absolutely going to buy this game again on Steam to more directly support these developers, because they are phenomenal, and what they've made is phenomenal, and the industry absolutely needs more stuff like this. Expedition 33 is now my 4th favorite game of all time. An absolutely bold claim, I know, especially when you consider the fact that the last time something affected my top 5 list was 5 or 6 years ago with the release of Death Stranding, my 3rd favorite game. And because to those of you who know me well, you'll know that my 4th favorite game previously was Oblivion. I mentioned multiple times that I really appreciate that game to death for introducing me to the 3D open world genre. That blew my mind. It's still in my top 10 somewhere. I want to say it's my 6th favorite game. But Expedition 33 takes its spot and is in my top 5 favorite games because it genuinely moved me in a way that very few games ever have. It has successfully proven that the genre I loved in my formative years, turn-based RPGs, not only have a spot in a contemporary landscape, but that they can also thrive, they can evolve, and they can surprise us all over again. And I hope that this game is seen as a landmark title and makes waves in the gaming industry for the foreseeable future, showcasing to the naysayers that yes, games like Final Fantasy can still be turn-based, they can still have that late 90s energy, and they can still attract newer audiences whilst doing so. So it should be pretty obvious by now that this isn't a 10 out of 10 game. Yuck. It's a 33 out of 10. Full stop. This is how you do it. So if you haven't played it yet, go do that right now. And trust me when I say that this is something you want to experience as fresh as possible. Please go in as blind as you can. I'm not even giving you the dang premise. Why? Because I knew absolutely nothing going into this game. I didn't even know what the title of the game meant. That was the biggest mystery for me. Like, what is Expedition 33? What is Clair Obscur? This is one of the most interesting titles I've ever seen. And I want that for you as well. Since that complete lack of knowledge made for one of the best gaming experiences I've ever had in my entire life, genuinely. It truly felt like a privilege getting to experience a game like this. And if you've experienced it and you want to see my live reaction to that incredible ending, then stick around. My spoilers section is coming up next, and as you can probably tell from the timeline of this video, it's a pretty long segment. Yeah, I had a lot to say about this game. I could not stop gushing over it. I wanted to be as thorough as I possibly could. But before we cut to that, I just want to thank you guys as always for watching. And if you ever want to catch me playing through these games live, please feel free to drop by twitch.tv/irritableindian. And if you try that, you missed a stream, you're feeling bad, you want to catch up on the VODs, no worries. I've got a second YouTube channel, that's Irritable Archives, where you can catch up on all of my VODs. And I've linked both of these things down in the description below as always. Anyways, guys, without further ado, here's the live review. Keep on keeping on. Chills watching this ending, it's beautiful. Cannot believe how good this was, man. What a fucking video game. What a video game that was. Like I said, I think it is an absolute privilege getting to experience something like this, especially in this day and age. Sandfall, you guys have earned all the flowers in the world. My props to you, Sandfall. Absolutely wonderful work. This is a triumphant artistry in video game design right here, gentlemen. An absolute 33 out of 10. The 33 in the title of Expedition 33 implies 33 out of 10. Trust me, I work for Sandfall, so I know. That is factual. I cannot fucking believe how good this game was, man. I cannot remember the last time I had zero expectations going into a game, that I was not anticipating a game, and something like this, an original work, just came out of the blue, took the world by storm, and then took me by storm, and ended up being something in my top 5 of all time. Genuinely. I've mentioned this a couple of times, specifically towards the end of our playthrough here, but I'm putting this in my review segment right here, right now. This game goes in my top 5 of all time. Seriously, I would consider it my number 4 favorite game, which to some of you out there may come as a surprise because you may know me a little bit well and will therefore know by extension that Oblivion is my 4th favorite game. And I've talked about that very recently, given that we also just played the remaster not long ago, which was amazing. But I'm willing to replace that with this game as my number 4 spot and put that maybe in my number 6, because it still did introduce me to open world games, which I'll never ever forget. But man, this is one of those once-in-a-lifetime games where from beginning to end, it's something incredibly poignant and moving, and where my notion of there being no such thing as a perfect game is heavily contested, because this is as close to perfect as you can get, man. I genuinely will have to spend an entire day to come up with flaws to think of for this thing. An absolute triumph, man. An absolutely wonderful success story in the video game industry. And I hope this makes waves and we see more like this in the future. Fucking incredible. GG's, man. And the music, man. Listen to that goddamn music. Every single track. There's so much music in this game. Number 1, the sheer variety of it. And number 2, how good it all was. I'm not even into classical music specifically, like, which is what this game largely consists of, right? Like a lot of piano, a lot of vocalizations behind the piano, but I loved even that. Right, for how it was utilized, what it sounded like, for all the character moments, the story scenarios, the combat scenarios, right, for which it felt like every single unique fight, even against trash mobs, had something unique playing. right? This is what, a 30 to 40 gigabyte game. I would argue, I would assume maybe that 10 to 15 gigabytes of that is just for the music alone, right? I saw a really funny comment that it was nice of the developers to include a free game with this soundtrack, because the music is such an integral part of this, and it is done so well. Yeah, well crafted, well acted, well written, just absolutely gorgeous. I completely agree. The story was absurdly good. Beautiful characters, beautiful world. Such a compelling narrative, right? With so many twists and turns and subversions that I know it's kind of a meme and sort of carries a negative connotation to say, oh, you know, subvert expectations. But this game is a freaking textbook example of how to subvert expectations. And I'll give you some examples of some insane subversions. Like, this is our spoiler review right here, right after completing it, which, by the way, we're 75 or 6 hours in it. We're clocking in at that much amount of time. We have not gotten all the achievements. I was hoping to, but unfortunately, due to one of those never-on quests that we botched up, we have to wait until NG Plus to get all of them. But we finished off every single major side content location, fought all the super bosses, including Simon, which, by the way, that was a freaking amazing fight. One of the coolest super bosses I've seen. Oh my god! Oh my god, we beat him! I don't even think we would beat him there, man. Holy shit, I thought we were gonna end up, like, icing him via mail by one-shotting him and skipping this stupid-ass phase where you gotta beat him with Team B. But we actually did it. We locked in. Ah, let's go. We beat him the hard way, not the one-shot Mael way. Hell yeah, man. Simon beaten on expert. But yeah, back to the main point. We got to talk about the subversions and how well they all panned out towards the end. The fact that Gustav is killed by the end of Act 1, the character who you think is going to be the main dude for the entirety of this game, the main protagonist, is iced at the end of the first act, which is like a solid quarter of the game. And that kind of makes you go, holy shit, what? And you're still in disbelief over the fact that he's dead. You're in denial over it because, you know, by that point, you may not have completed his entire skill tree. Who, by the way, this was an amazing first gig for Charlie Cox in the video game industry. Which is also funny considering I was recently watching Daredevil again, the first 3 seasons before the new soft reboot of the show, Born Again, with my friends. I was checking that out. So kind of a cool coincidence that we played something with him in it. He crushed it as Gustav, man, bringing to life this really endearing character who you really felt the sting when you lost him, right? The game really makes you care about Gustav. And it also makes you love what he represents, which is the fact that this is a game that deals with some serious dark material with heavy themes that are so beautifully juxtaposed by a lot of lighthearted moments and humor sprinkled in to kind of offset all of that. Gustav represented that wonderfully. Like, I really loved how unfiltered and unsanitized this game was. When it needed to be dark and heavy, it was dark and heavy, and it had a bunch of F-bombs here and there in terms of the vernacular. And, you know, the characters would cuss in French every now and again, which I thought was really amusing and cool. But then from time to time, it had these really sweet, wholesome moments between the characters as well. With Eski being such a great example of that, who I'd prefer to call Besquier. But yeah, all in all, in terms of this stuff, this game lived up to its title of light and dark. Clair Obscur. And then Verso shows up, who at first you're like, okay, there's Ben Starr's character, and I've been looking forward to seeing Ben Starr's character for a little minute now, especially considering all the marketing that he did for the game, all the press he did for the game, all the interviews and stuff like that. For the first quarter, you're wondering where he is, when he's going to show up. And then Ben Starr is amazing as usual. I couldn't wait to see his character. And then Verso, of course, shows up at the end of Act 1. And he crushed it as always. I would argue this is his best character. I love Clive from 16, but I would argue that, man, Verso is my favorite character he's played thus far. Such a layered, amazing fucking dude. And then there's, of course, Andy Serkis playing his father, Renoir, who delivered a devastating performance, man. I was tearing up towards the end. What a powerhouse of an actor. So yeah, Gustav dies at the end of the first act. He's killed by Painted Renoir, so Aileen's version of Renoir. And then you're kind of wondering, like, okay, now Verso's finally here, right? He's finally arrived into the story, Ben Starr's character. But damn, like, I miss Verso. Is he gonna, like, kind of replace him? Is it gonna feel like he's cheaply replacing the dude? And is he not gonna be like a compelling character? Is he gonna feel forced? Is there gonna be contrived writing around him? But my god, does the game beautifully kind of weave his story and make you realize that not only is he a wonderful character, but that he's also literally central to the story. And no, thank you guys. Thank you from the bottom of my heart and the hearts of many who loved this game. The industry needs more experiences like this. Sandfall, you absolutely cooked, you absolute legends. And once again, my highest commendation is that it's a top 5 game for me. It's my number 4 favorite game of all time. Fucking cinema, man. But yeah, the story, dude. I still cannot get over thinking Gustav's the main dude, and that's another JRPG trope this game has of getting you attached to a character in your party who then dies and then he's gone, man. I will never forget how brilliant that was about this game. You thinking that he's the main dude, then him dying, and then Verso coming along, and then you going, what's going on here, right? And then he turns out to be the most amazing fucking dude in this entire game, and you don't, it's not that you forget about Gustav, you just feel, I can't believe Verso wasn't introduced sooner. And I've never seen a game do that. Maybe I've not played a lot of games. I have never seen a story like that before, where you play it from the perspective of one character who you think is central, and then the actual central character to the story is introduced after the end of the first act. He's such a wonderfully conflicted character who's kind of trying to be on the side of Eileen and the painted family that she's created for Verso, but also realizing that this needs to stop, right? That this world needs to go. The focus is also shifted to Mayel being a really important character, and gradually you start to realize that, damn, she is equally as important to the story as Verso, that ultimately this is a narrative about two siblings within this canvas who are witnessing this war between their parents, right? One who is grieving over the loss of her son, the real version of Verso, and one who is trying to pull his wife out of this world that she's kind of using to cope with his loss and immersing herself within in order to grieve in the way that she thinks is helpful. And at the end of it all, you start to realize that there are no villains in this story, right? Like, I personally am kind of on Renoir's side in this whole thing. Even though I can completely understand where all the characters are coming from, I think Renoir is the most tragic and misunderstood character in all of this, because he's largely painted, no pun intended, as the villain throughout it all. But then you realize, wait, that's just Aileen's perspective and her version of Renoir that's kind of out to stop us from keeping her from leaving the canvas. And then you see the real Renoir, and he's a shattered husband who's just in complete despair over the fact that his family is broken and that they've kind of they're losing themselves to this world, and they're sickening themselves by being in this world for too long. And he wants to get them out and move on in a way that's healthy for the family, right? He believes it's important to let go of Verso and accept the reality in front of them, which is that he's truly gone and that they need to now be together more than ever to kind of heal. And I thought the way that the game represented that was absolutely beautiful, and how it even gave us a choice at the end, whether we wanted to kind of side with Renoir's perspective or Aileen's, right? Which is telegraphed via, of course, Mayel and Verso. Yeah, we went with Verso's ending. I think Renoir is a classic example of the whole XYZ did nothing wrong meme, right? Like for Berserk, Guts did, or I'm sorry, I'm not super familiar with Berserk. Griffith did nothing wrong, that whole thing. I think Renoir kind of falls under that for this game. Wonderful character. Every single character in this game was absolutely wonderful. Just so layered, so compelling. And I mean, even before Act 1, right? Going back to the point about how it's always subverting expectations, there's so many twists and turns. The fact that the game also introduces Sophie's character at the beginning, right? And this is another reason why you think Gustav's about to be the main dude, because one of the tropes is, for when you're experiencing the story of the character who's the central one, is that, okay, you're going to be introduced fairly quickly to their significant other. And that is relayed through Sophie's character, who you also get to play as in the prologue. And she's gone. She's killed at the end of the prologue. I've never seen a game have balls like that before, or a story have balls like that too. At the end of the prologue, kill a character who at that point you come to care for so much. I could not believe how emotionally invested I was into the story of Gustav and Sophie by the end of the prologue, man. I was very, very moved when I saw that scene of Sophie being gommaged, right? And the music playing in the backdrop that was very, very somber and just so touching. I've been playing the game for less than 2 hours. How am I already so emotionally invested, man? How do I already have chills? How is this already hitting me in the feels? It had only been like 2 hours, and I was like, how has this game grabbed me this much? It's just a testament to the wonderful writing, right? And then eventually over the course of the game, how it's kind of just revealed all of these twists and the revelations about the canvas and all of that we're all in a painted world here, and it's a world created by Verso, and the Gestrels and all of these wacky, whimsical creatures were his inventions, right? Within this world that he loved to escape into as a child, which makes you mourn for his loss so much more, because you never really see the real Verso when you play. But what's beautiful and I love this about the game, is you get insight into his character from his creations in it, right? Given how colorful the gestuals are, given just how wonderful this world is that you're going through, right? With the exception of, you know, fighting the Nevrons and stuff, and how a lot of things are out to get us and stop us, and there's that whole somber aspect of trying to fight against Aline and her trying to fight back against us. When you take all that out of the equation, you can tell that Verso was just a really imaginative child who created such a beautiful world, and I think that's such a nice little detail about the game. And then yeah, you eventually find out it's all a painted world and nothing in it is actually real, it's all imaginary. And it's so mind-bending. There are points in this game where I was like, dude, not even Nolan could think of shit as mind-bending as this. Like, there are points where you go, wait, what the hell? So, I'll give you a great example. Verso and Mael, for the first half of the story, it's kind of established before you find out the Verso you're playing as is a painted creation, that Alicia, who is male, like it's Mael / Alicia, right? He kind of relays that she was in a fire and she lost her ability to speak and her face is all messed up. And you kind of think to yourself, okay, she probably died too in that fire. That's kind of what it hints towards. So you're like, okay, Verso's the surviving brother, and Alicia / or really Alicia at that point is a sibling who died. But then it turns out the reality is that Alicia / Mael survived and Verso's the one who actually died. Like, what a freaking mind-bending twist, right? I've never seen something like that before. The story is so imaginative and unique, right? There's only so much you can do to reinvent the wheel, and this game does that, and it does it with flying colors. So many amazing twists and turns and subversions that really contribute towards enriching the story, right? And the dynamic between all the characters, the family members. Beautiful experience, man. And yeah, like it's ultimately, like I said, a story about grief, and thematically you see that popping up pretty much everywhere throughout the experience. There's a lot of symbolism, there are a lot of like deeper layers to what the characters are talking about, and it's really a story about how grief affects the ones you love around you, right? Now, I bet you what a lot of people might be saying about this game is that they wish the game had gone into more details about what was happening outside the canvas, right? Because they establish very vaguely, right? They don't really give you a lot to go off of, that outside the canvas, there's a conflict going on in the real world between the painters, so the family we witness in this game, and the writers, so that's their rival faction. And the game doesn't really tell you anything about the writers. And I'd imagine by extension, a lot of people might have been a little bit disappointed by that, potentially. I'd have no idea. Or maybe they're now hoping for a sequel that goes into that, which I'm not, and I'll tell you why in a second. I think that the game actually does tell you, indirectly and implicitly, who the writers are. I think the writers are musicians. I think in the same way that the painters can create these worlds via canvases and paint on canvases, I think that the writers are musicians who have the ability to do the same thing just through music. And the only reason I say this is because Verso strongly hints at the fact that he wanted to be a musician growing up, and he wanted to like break away from the mold of his family of painters. So I'd imagine maybe that could be a hint at the fact that, you know, the writers are this other faction that wrote music, and that's who, you know, Verso was like kind of wanting to become growing up. But this is just speculation and theorizing at this point on my part. And I just want to spend another second talking about the story. I think the storytelling was amazing. We talked about like the subversions that were done really well, but something I appreciate about this story, man, is how it doesn't treat the audience like they're idiots. You know, there's like not a lot of exposition in this game. There's barely any, right? I don't think there's any exposition. There are no moments in this game that come across as, yes, the characters are talking to each other, but it more so feels like they are aware of the player's knowledge, and they're kind of sitting them down and bring them up to speed on what's happening. It always feels so esoteric. And yes, it is going to leave you very confused for like the first half of the game, but it is one of those beautiful experiences where once you figure out what's happening, once the revelations hit you, it's one of those beautiful stories. It makes you think to yourself, okay, in hindsight, I kind of see those conversations a bit differently. If I play this game again, I'll see them in a much different light. And I think that's going to be another wonderful aspect of going through this game again a second time. It's 100% a game that warrants a second or third playthrough, right? To kind of just pick up on all those details. And I love that about a good story. When you can go through it a second time and pick up on a metric butt ton of details that you didn't catch the first time because you had no idea what was going on. But it's one of the best executions of that trope that I have ever seen. When it comes to storytelling. Dude, I'm sure if I play the game again, we're going to see hints of Verso working behind the scenes in Act 1, getting all the expeditioners on his side to defeat the Paintress. What an incredible story that was. We're looking at the rating right here once again. This is a 33 out of a 10 game. I can't believe how much I enjoyed this game, man. I know I say it a lot, but genuinely, I cannot remember the last time I played a game I wasn't looking forward to, or rather I just had no plans on playing. Yet here we are. I wanted to do absolutely everything I possibly could in this game at the end, and we did most of that. And this was a detour within a detour. My original plan was to play Death Stranding 1 this month, and then Oblivion Remastered came out, so we had to touch base with that because, of course, it's Oblivion. And then this game was as good as it was, and it looked right up my alley because of a multitude of reasons. The number one being the combat, right? I know I'm going on and on about the game's story because, dude, it deserves all the praise in the world. I think the most impressive part is that this story was written by someone with no prior industry experience. There's some trivia for you guys, and we'll talk more about this a little bit later in this review. The story was written by someone who was found on Reddit. Their role initially was to do some voice acting for the demo and maybe even beyond, but they ended up doing the narrative for this, and look how incredible it turned out. Masterful, man. So good. So, the number one reason I wanted to play this was because of all the talk around town I was hearing about this game's turn-based combat and how amazing it was, and how this should be the poster child for modern JRPG turn-based combat, and that this facet is more than capable of existing with modern sensibilities, and that the naysayers who are talking about how it can no longer exist, specifically with regards to things like Final Fantasy and how, you know, Final Fantasy does need to be more action-oriented, it does need to be more real-time oriented going forward because, you know, turn-based won't sell and all of that, how this game kind of puts those to rest because of how good the implementation was. That's what I had heard about. And having completed this after 75 hours, I can confidently say, my god, were they right, and then some. This game is every bit as magical as people are making it out to be. And right now, specifically in regards to the combat, but also in terms of every other facet. Seriously. The combat in this game is impeccable. This is one of the best turn-based games I've ever played, if not the best. I'm actually going to go out there and say that. I think this is the most enjoyable turn-based game I've played in my entire life. And Final Fantasy VII is a turn-based game, and that's my favorite game of all time. I think this is even more fun than that, even though that is still my favorite game ever. This is the most fun I've ever had in a turn-based experience. And it makes sense. Once I go into these details, it's going to make sense. It is the perfect fusion of turn-based with real-time. I think this game is the closest that you could possibly get to making the paradox that is the statement real-time turn-based or turn-based real-time actually makes sense. Because yes, it is turn-based. Yes, time stops for you to select your commands, but the way that you're always on your feet, always having to parry attacks, always having to dodge attacks, and a myriad multitude of these like really unique, wacky attacks from a myriad of really unique, wacky enemies, by the way, which like the enemy variety was insanely cool and what they look like and their designs and all of that. The fact that this game makes you always react to things going on and always tests your mechanical skill with parrying and dodging, despite being turn-based at the end of the day, is what makes it so incredibly engaging and what makes this like the perfect blend of a lot of modern video game DNA when it comes to action elements and old school turn-based JRPG stuff. And I think that makes for a phenomenal combat system that proves that this can exist in this day and age, and that I hope makes waves and sends signals to other developers, specifically ones like Square Enix, for example, that, hey, listen, Final Fantasy being turn-based can still be a thing going forward. The fact that this game exists, the fact that it did as well as it did, the fact that people responded as well as they did, and it sold like 2 million copies in 2 weeks, I think should send the strongest of messages that this type of game can do more than well. And there's a lot of Soulsborne influence in here, right? Which is amazing considering that's pretty much my favorite subgenre, and the fact that Bloodborne is my second favorite game ever. But specifically, I want to bring up Sekiro, which I think the developers have literally gone on record saying that that game is one of the ones that heavily inspired and informed this one. And you can kind of see why, because parrying is so integral to the experience. And it's so sick, man, when you parry and what that looks like and the animations, and when you pull off perfect parries, or rather, you parry an entire enemy's like chain, and then you immediately counterattack, and sometimes counterattack with the entire team when you see those expedition counters. And God, it was so amazing looking. All the animations, all the sound effects, the crunchiness, the feedback, all of it was impeccable. I loved it. Especially with the music, once again, they crushed it with that, and how that was infused into everything is so good. People are going to love this who love real-time challenging combat elements. And one thing I will absolutely say based on my own experience playing this game is, please, if you can, and if you are someone who loves games that really challenge you, or games that are really challenging mechanically when it comes to this kind of stuff, is play this game on Expert. And to take it a step further, this is optional, but this is what I did, do a glass cannon build. Because if you're anyone like me who loves challenges in games like, you know, the Soulsborne series where anything can like one-shot you, especially, you know, if you more recently played the Elden Ring DLC, you'll know how brutal some of the bosses are. If you love that kind of stuff, if you live for going for multiple attempts over and over and over and over again, where you feel like you're learning a little more each time to finally defeat a boss, do a glass cannon build where everything one-shots you, but then every single attempt you're learning a bit more about their movesets, the timings for the parries, the dodges, the windows, until you finally beat them and oof, you feel that euphoria. Come on. Oh, not again. Thank the heavens. That's all I'm going to say about that. Come on! Let's end this! Nature, come to me! Mayhem, come to me! Oh god, we don't have enough for that. We do not have enough, I repeat, we do not have enough. That's fine, just kick him in the face. For like no damage at all. Oh no. Can we get him with this?
Here's your card.
We can. Yeah, here's your card, bitch. Here's your card. Take these cards. Take these cards on expert mode. I think I have never felt this feeling I love the most about playing challenging games more than I ever have than with this game. And it is that feeling of improving every single attempt and not feeling like you're plateauing somewhere or being uncertain of yourself, right? As to whether, okay, am I actually getting better or not? You know, sometimes when I play even my favorite Soulsborne games, there are times when I will go, oh my god, you know, I do feel like I'm improving overall. But dear god, there may be a point where we never actually beat this boss and we never play this game ever again. In this game, you will never get that feeling. The closest I got was with Simon the Super Boss, who, by the way, was fucking badass. One of the coolest super bosses I've seen. They killed it with his design and how you get to him and how you fight him and, you know, all of the bells and whistles of it. Had like the trademark elements of late 90s super bosses where, once again, hard to find and borderline impossible to beat. It took us like 6 hours to get him ultimately across like 2 streams, but it was also worth it, especially on expert once again. Play this on expert if you can, if you love challenges in games like I do and being given a run for your money. But in a way where it's challenging, but really fair. Like, when you fuck up and die, it's because of you. It's never because of the game. All the movesets felt more than fair and more than appropriate to the enemy you were fighting, right? If it was like a basic trash mob, they wouldn't have like crazy complex movesets. If it was a really difficult enemy, or once again, super boss or some optional boss in Act 3, they would have all these unique gimmicks and all these unique timings and really rapid attacks and everything like that that would just throw you for a loop and have you go through multiple attempts until you finally get a little bit closer to figuring out some stuff and then eventually crack it. But every single one of those attempts, I always felt like I was getting a little bit better each time. I never once felt like I plateaued, and that's such a nice feeling. I don't think I've ever gotten that feeling as better as I had than with this game, truly. The build variety and customization in this game was absolutely wonderful as well. You could go so deep with it, right? With the cast that you're presented with and all like the Pictos and Luminas that you can unlock, which borrow a lot of inspiration from Final Fantasy IX, which had a very similar system. There's so much you can do with these characters. There's so many builds you can do. Now, granted, a lot of people are going to have one commonality across their builds, which is Mayel being an absolutely busted one-shot character, which is oh so satisfying, by the way. But really, in theory, you can make anyone broken. Like Monaco, Mayel, and Verso are the characters I largely ran for a bulk of my playthrough, right? And Monaco was someone who I also made really sauced out, right? Especially with his one gradient attack that would put him on the Almighty card, after which he would attack with the fire move with his shield and do like 5 to 6 million damage per turn. I know it's not anything crazy like Mayel's eventual 20 million damage you can do, but still, it's so fun experimenting with different characters, different builds. I've seen a lot of people go ham with CL, who we seldom played in our playthrough here, but in an NG Plus run, which I'm for sure going to do someday, I can absolutely see myself enjoying some replayability here, going in with a different set of party members and trying out things with CL and Lune and discovering shit and synergies between the characters that I didn't know were there before. So many cool ways they can synergize, and I also just really appreciate how the characters in this, they didn't feel like run-of-the-mill, stereotypical classes, if you will, in terms of more traditional like RPG tropes. you can't really sum up these characters into like one word, because a lot of what they do feels so different from what you've played in the past, even though there are things that are identifiable, like, you know, Lune is casting magic and stuff, and she's pretty much like a traditional mage. The way they all ultimately work makes them so unique and just so interesting. Right, like Lune having this whole concept of like when she casts a spell, depending on what it is, she creates these stains, and then with another spell she can consume specific stains of specific colors to like do some specific effect. It is just really cool. You know, and then Monaco, of course, you could sum him up as a blue mage or like a beastmaster, right? But he's actually both, right? So that makes him kind of unique as well. He's like a really cool hybridization of beastmaster and blue mage. This game very, very clearly, this is the elephant in the room here, is a modern JRPG, or if you want to be more specific, FRPG, right? Since technically it was developed by a French team, right? This is a French game, but all the sensibilities are essentially late 90s to early 2000s JRPG elements. I loved that, and I loved all the various ways in which all of that informed this game. It's very clear that this game is a big old messy love letter to the late 90s and early 2000s JRPG games. I never thought I would live to see the day that I would get to experience some beloved classics growing up, like Final Fantasy 7, 8, 9, Chrono Cross, and Legend of Dragoon. I just never thought I'd experience those kind of games again. Granted, I never finished Final Fantasy 8 or Chrono Cross, but still, a lot of those games kind of molded my childhood, man. And this game tapped into so much nostalgia for me in the best of ways. It just hit all the right notes in terms of everything. In terms of what the combat felt like and some of the QTEs that felt like I was playing Legend of Dragoon a little bit. And to that point, I think Legend of Dragoon was what I was reminded of the most out of all of those games when I played through this. Not just from the QTEs and the combat, which is the elephant in the room for a lot of fellow LOD fans going into this, but also because of a lot of the music. Man, once again, the music was incredible in this, but when I was going through some of the gestural levels, but some of the more serene, quieter ones, like the Sacred River, for example, a lot of the music, a lot of the instrumentals really harken back to Legend of Dragoon for me. And I was just enraptured, man. I felt like a little kid all over again. I had goosebumps. And this is a little thing, but it just goes to show you how much these developers truly care about JRPGs and how much of a fan of them they are as much as we are. There are some tiny levels you can go to in the open world that have a fixed camera that, you know, show your characters as little dudes running around, but the camera is no longer following them. And you get this beautiful landscape. I love that. Like, that was a clear callback to the pre-rendered hand-drawn static backgrounds of late 90s, you know, PS1 RPGs. It was such a nice callback, and it was just so heartwarming to see little things like that. When I first went into those kinds of areas, I couldn't see my characters because they were so far away, and so I was kind of like, wait, are we waiting for a cutscene here? I'll never forget this moment. And then I just moved the analog a bit. I was like, oh, wait a minute, there they are. They're the characters. And it was such a cool throwback moment for me, man. And I was like, oh my god, I'm in heaven right now. Such a small thing, but I love this. So yeah, I just think this game was dripping with late 90s JRPG influence in the best of ways. With the level design, the music, the progression through everything. Which, by the way, even like the structure of how you're going through things like the overworld, which I gotta spend a second talking about that too. The fact that this game even had an overworld to begin with. I shit you not, the first little bit of this game, when you're going through some levels back to back as Gustave and Lune, I thought that would kind of be the whole game, that it would be very focused. And at that point, I was still really enjoying it. I thought this was really interesting. So if that had been the whole game, I would have been like, you know what, cool. Shit, the story seems great. The combat seems amazing. If this is all we're doing for the rest of the experience, sign me up. But then that moment when you fight that boss as Lune and Gustave, and then you exit that cave, and then you emerge into the overworld, dude, it literally felt like I was playing Final Fantasy VII in 2025 for the very first time. I had the same reaction that I had when leaving Midgar in FF7 originally. I had the same reaction I had when I left the jail in Oblivion at the very beginning, once again in this game. Setting foot in this vast world beyond me. I didn't think that would be in this game, and it was, and I never thought I'd get that feeling again of just being awed away at like an open world or a overworld that was just so beautifully done, and done in like the same light, the same vein as, once again, these JRPGs that we know and love from our formative years. And the way you progress through it, and what it looks like, it's just always engaging you. There's always stuff going on, vying for your attention, like some kind of flying, colorful lighthouse dragon thing. And then like some mountains in the distance, which have these like giants roaming around, and then like a giant in the ocean, and you just want to like go check in with all of it, like floating rocks. You want to like fly up there, and the best part is you're eventually gonna fly up there if you play JRPGs, because you're anticipating that towards the end of the game, the world's really gonna open up, and you'll get an airship, and you'll be able to go up there and do things up there. And sure enough, that does happen. You do get an airship. You get Eske, who can fly around, who's the best kid. He's a freaking amazing character. Oh my god, this game was awesome, man. If I was told, right, that I could only say one positive thing about this game, right, only one positive thing, here's what I would actually say about this that makes it so good, right? And I'm talking about gameplay right now, right? What I would say is that the pacing is fucking perfect. One of my highest commendations for Expedition 33 is that it doesn't have an issue that I think even the best games I play have, and that is pacing. Some of the best games that I play, and I'll use Final Fantasy VII Rebirth as an example, something we played last year. I loved Remake and Rebirth. I think it did a solid job overall, recreating the moments I know and love from my favorite game of all time. Rebirth, and more so Remake, right? This problem was more egregious in Remake, had this big problem of level pacing, right? Where sometimes you would find that levels would overstay their welcome. I felt that a good bit with Rebirth last year in a specific segment, halfway through the game, where you were kind of like having to play as a specific character and do some platforming stuff here and there. And I was like, okay, you know what? Cool that we're doing this. A little gimmicky, a little unique, but we're doing it for a little too long. Let's get to the next segment. There's always something that feels like it's halting the progression of gameplay and is kind of padding out the experience. I feel that for the most part with a lot of games. My god, did this game not have that issue a single time. A single time. I know I say that about a lot of things in this game, but I truly and genuinely mean it. I can't remember the last time I played a video game that didn't have any pacing issues. Every level you go through in this game, every unique biome you run through, which by the way, there's so much biodiversity here and so many unique, colorful, beautiful environments, man, that have just been rendered impeccably. Everything is just so colorful looking. Everything is so mind-bending, and especially with how there are all these like floating pieces of geometry kind of like melding together before you with these like colorful skyboxes. It's just so lovely going through all the unique environments that each have their own color palette that makes sense to be vibrant because, they're all within this canvas, ultimately. Like everything eventually kind of contributes to this idea that you're within a painting, and the game reminds you of that really well. I think none of the levels, and there's so many levels once again, none of them overstay their welcome. You go through them for a perfect amount of time, enjoying them to their fullest, kind of being awestruck at everything you're looking at, witnessing all the character moments that, have just been given the perfect amount of time to, in terms of the cinematics and stuff like that. And then like everything is ended off by a boss fight, right? But in general, you're just always engaged. Approaching and attacking enemies in the levels never gets old. Fighting them never gets old. And I think that contributes so well to the solid pacing. And there's so many optional paths here and there in these levels that allow you to go off the beaten path and discover some really cool secrets and useful items like new Pictos, colors of Lumina, as well as a lot of really funny cosmetics for the characters that never fail to amuse you and put a big old grin on your face. And then of course, fighting so many awesome bosses. It's just the scale of it all is just so gobsmacking amazing as well, right? How when you fight a giant enemy, they're actually giant with a capital G, right? And their designs are so interesting and intriguing, and you want to know more. And as you play, you get all these tidbits that kind of like tell you more about what you're going through with the expedition logs of the folks who came before you to kind of go kill the paintress / Aileen. And funnily, and I mentioned this a couple of times on my playthrough, that really reminded me of Fallout in a weird way, and one of my favorite aspects of Fallout 2, which is going through post-apocalyptic America and getting to know what happened to each and every vault, what twisted experiment happened in the vaults, what happened to the inhabitants. It kind of felt like that, picking up the expedition logs as we played, finding out what made it so that particular expedition couldn't make it to the end. I thought that was really neat. I was listening to every single one of them. They were beautifully voice acted, by the way. And once again, massive props to the voice acting. And the visuals are great. The performance was wonderful too. This is one of those rare Unreal Engine 5 games where I didn't get like a single stutter. I didn't get like a single hitch anywhere. Of course, we had some weird crashing issues. Overcharge, baby. Are you kidding me? You're fucking joking, right? You know, that was a bit of a bummer, but they were few and far between. And by the way, if I can impart some help to some of you out there for how I fixed my crashes, because I've seen other people contend with crashes in this game on PC, try and set your DLSS to balanced. Reduce that render scaling. I'll show you right now. Go to graphics, and you want to set this to balanced for the DLSS scaling. Funnily, that fixed my problem completely. So try that out if you're still having problems and you haven't looked into that yet. But otherwise, the performance was wonderful. Everything was buttery smooth. Everything looked amazing. I'm just really happy with how all the optimization stuff turned out. Definitely the best Unreal Engine 5 game I personally played thus far. Let's talk about the development behind this game, right? It's absolutely worth kind of shedding some light and some attention on the wonderful development story that this game was and what went into that, right? So this game was made by one bored Ubisoft employee who had a vision of essentially this game. He left the company, and I think he had around 10 to 12 people with him. So he started his little company, Sandfall. They pitched this idea to many, many people with a lot of potential investors. And Kepler was the one that was interested. And what's amazing is that they did this in 2021 when Kepler itself was a very new studio. How does a team of 10 to 12 people, who eventually became a team of 30 people once Kepler gave them the resources and funding and staff necessary, how is a team this small, right? Who granted did do a bit of like contracting to get some people to like help them out from the outside. How does a game end up being this incredible? So Kepler is a co-owned publishing house. All their indie devs have equity in Kepler. A good example is Slowclap, who made Sifu, another wonderful game that we played a couple years ago. They also got a lot of money behind them. Kepler got this significant investment from NetEase, kind of a cool crossover, by the way. So NetEase, for those who don't know, made Marvel Rivals, which is another game that we're a fan of. Play a bunch around here on stream. They gave them an investment of around, I think it was like $130 million. So quite a bit of moolah. And then of course, a lot of these developers who co-own the studio made a lot of successful games, and they help one another out with the resources that they have. Now, the beautiful part about this whole pipeline is that all of these developers get to retain creative agency and get to do what they want. So they don't have these like crazy like executives, shareholders to kind of like appease and, you know, ensure they meet the deadlines and expectations of. So whatever they want to get done in this game, they can get done in this game with as little pushback as possible. And so when you combine all this information, it's no wonder they made something as fucking beautiful and ambitious as this title, right? Where every little bit and piece was as polished as you'd imagine the developers wanted them to be. They cooked for 4 years with this game, man. Absolutely. And I just want to like give a shout out to the whole angle of how they hired a lot of people, not on the basis of how long they worked in the industry or anything like that, but just on the merit of their talent, right? Like once again, the lead writer was from Reddit. The freaking composer behind music this beautiful, like what we're listening to right now, was from SoundCloud. Can you believe that? Once again, these are their first industry gigs. How freaking amazing did this game turn out considering that, right? It just goes to show you two things, right? Number one, doesn't matter where you're coming from. If you have an idea and you're burning to see that idea to fruition, you're going to get that idea to fruition, man. Creativity always wins at the end of the day. And number two, to like hiring managers out there, give your hirees a little bit more leeway, man. There are a lot of people with a lot of talent out there, even if they haven't been in the industry for long, who are capable of making stuff like this. So give them a shot. Should you buy this game? Question mark. You should buy this game. Period. But to give you a more nuanced answer than that, if you like turn-based games, absolutely get this game. If you like JRPGs, absolutely get this game. If you grew up with JRPGs and love turn-based games, you should already be playing this game. If you don't like either of those, but you still love a good story, you love Soulsborne games, specifically with the way they mechanically challenge you, you love amazing music, you will not be disappointed. I'll talk about the music for a second again. It made me want to like get up and start dancing. So much of the music in this game was so distracting in the best way possible.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, this is a game. We gotta fight. All right, here we go. It's all come down to this. Final boss. Let's go, Dad. 33 out of 10 music, 33 out of 10 story, 33 out of 10 characters, gameplay. I hope there's DLC. I should speak on this a little bit for a second too, about my hopes and dreams for this going forward. Number one, I think DLC would be phenomenal. I would love a DLC that's a prequel DLC that kind of sheds light on Simon. Simon, when you go down to Renoir's drafts and fight him, the way it's presented, that part of the game feels more Soulsborne than any other part of the game with its presentation, right? It's badass. It was amazing. And Simon's theme was a frickin' banger. I would hope there's a DLC that goes into his past, his story, how he got there. That's my hopes and dreams for a DLC type situation. As for sequels, we kind of touched on this a bit earlier. I know a lot of people might want a sequel, finding out more about the painters and the writers and their conflict. I think they shouldn't continue with this world. I should also mention, I think most people might want to see a sequel that kind of shows another canvas, and maybe there could be more games, and like they could start a Clair Obscur franchise and every game is like a different story in a different canvas. I don't think they should do that either. One of the best parts about this game is the twist that everything is happening within a canvas, right? If you already know that from the get-go, I think that takes away from a lot of the experience, you know? So I think that this story should remain as is. This world should remain as is, with the story that it tells that we get to experience here, and shouldn't be expanded upon any further beyond like a DLC type situation. I don't think we should see anything beyond the ending. It was perfect. What I think should happen in terms of a sequel situation, I would love for this to be the case. I don't think it will take place, but this is just my dream, right? I hope that Clair Obscur, yes, does become a franchise. I hope that there are more games, but I hope that this is the new Final Fantasy. I hope that it's an anthology series where every single game has the title Clair Obscur, insert subtitle here about a different story, and then so on and so forth. And each story is about light and dark, right? So Clair Obscur means light and dark as I understand it. I would hope that each story has similar themes, unique stories, unique characters, unique sub-themes, but they should be about light and dark somewhere. And they should have recurring motifs as well. Once again, like most JRPGs, characters trying to like come together and, you know, stop some kind of a threat. So in this case, it was the characters banding together to stop the paintress. But it should also have physical elements coming back as well. Kind of like, once again, in Final Fantasy, where every single game has chocobos, every single game has Moogles, every single game has summons, so on and so forth. Well, what I think would be amazing is, let's say there's another Clair Obscur game, the Gestrels are back, but the lore for them is different. Kind of like how the lore for all these recurring elements is different across each Final Fantasy game, how they're recontextualized every time. I think it would be really cool if we see stuff like that for Clair Obscur going forward. Like, the Gestrels are back, but this time they're not within a canvas, they're not creations of a little kid named Verso. They're just kind of there for whatever reason they're there for in that specific world. Let's make them like an iconic trademark element of this franchise, you know? But that's just me, and I completely understand any and all pushback against that idea, because I 100% empathize with the idea that maybe this should be its own one-off thing, and the developers should explore even further with their creativity to do even more new projects and more unique things going forward and create more beautiful original experiences. I'm completely okay with that as well, but what I'm saying is, if they had to do a franchise out of this, if they had to make more sequels, please, dear baby God, my hopes and desires is that they go for the anthology route. I think that could be sick, man. It really is difficult to come up with constructive criticism for this, but if I had to, right? Here's why this shit is beautiful. Any and all criticisms I have are easily overridden to me by the fact that this game is a callback, a modern callback to JRPGs. What do I mean by that? Let me give you some examples. They could have made it so you could add markers to the world map when traversing the world map. They could have made it so you could fast travel around the locations of the world map. Like modern sensibilities to get around things. That could have made the quality of life aspect a bit better. I'm okay that they didn't do that stuff, because it really felt like the way I was interfacing with the world, flying around in it, airshipping around in it towards the end, really made me feel like I was playing my favorite JRPGs. When the world really opened up with so much optional stuff. Like, there's a butt ton of optional content in this game, man. So much stuff to do. So many secrets, so many optional enemies, and there's so much gameplay variety here. How fucking awesome was that? Right? The fact that they didn't have to do this, but they went the extra mile and put in mini games. They put in the ability to do like some platforming stuff with the characters while running around in the levels. They always spice things up. They always tried to do things that broke away from the mold and the beaten path of, okay, you're just fighting enemies all the time, which if that's all we were doing, I would have been fine with that. But the fact that they went the extra mile, oh my God, I love that. There are freaking mini games in this? What? Okay, this game just went from a 10 out of 10 to like an 11. Are we like shooting him back? What did it say we have to do? Shit. Oh, God. Yeah, we do. Okay, massive. This is so sick. Okay, minigames are so important to me, man. They seem like a small thing, but anything to, like, spice up the usual, even if the usual is freaking awesome, is such a big deal in the best way possible. This game's fucking amazing. Another thing, about, like, a quarter of a way through the game, before the twist is revealed to us that this is all a painted canvas and we're witnessing the story of the family within it, I was about to have like a pain point of You know, I don't know if I like the characters of Lune and Ciel as much, or maybe even Monaco, even though Monaco definitely started to grow on me. I was like, why isn't more time being allocated to these characters outside of the little camp scenarios where you're talking to them? Because that's where a bulk of their character building happens. Then you realize it makes sense, because the stars of the show are Mayel and Verso. This is their world, and everyone in it is a construct of their world, right? So it makes sense that the game would focus more on those characters and sort of relegate any development for the side characters and creations of the painting to those little camp moments. And I think the camp moments were great. What could have inherently been very boring with the camp stuff, which normally just has you running around talking to characters and has that whole trope of you kind of stand still and there are not a lot of animations back and forthing with the party members in your camp. What could have been really boring was spiced up a good bit. Like the moment you could fight Monaco, the moment you could get new hairdos for both Monaco and Verso. You go swimming with Ciel, right? And then, of course, this game has its own affinity system with the party members, which is really cool. You know, at the end of which you unlock new grading attacks for your party members, and even this secret mode of traversal for SK, which I thought was really inventive. The characters are always doing some cool, funky stuff to keep you a little bit more engaged than just, okay, they're just like shedding more light on their stories, which on its own was great because these characters genuinely had some interesting moments, some interesting pasts. Which then culminates in you doing like a side quest for each and every one of them towards the end in Act 3, which do the side quests, man. They really expand on stuff, especially the one for Mayel. It was amazing going up that tower, confronting Alicia, freeing her spirit. Any and all criticisms I might have for this game aren't really even issues for me. So for that reason, it's a masterpiece. It's as close to perfect as something can get, and is my 4th favorite game of all time. That's what I have to say about Expedition 33, man. A top 5 game of all time for me. Every facet of a game, right? Everything that goes into making a video game is a triumphant 33 out of 10. And that's my review. Go out and fucking play this masterpiece of a game.